I call this meeting to order of the Committee on Health and Human Service Policy. Can we please take our seats, members, and a quorum is present. May I have a motion to approve the meetings for February the 12th?
So moved.
No.
Okay. Representative Albright moves approval of the minutes for Tuesday, February the 12th. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion prevails and the minutes for Tuesday, February 12th are approved. So we have our first bill moving, House File 679, Representative Morrison. Please go ahead and move your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that House File 679 be recommended for re-referral to the Committee on Ways and Means.
All right. So we have the bill before the committee. Is there anyone? Oh, can you explain the bill, please?
Yes, Madam Chair. House File 679 addresses an urgent need to assure funding for children's residential mental health services for May and June of 2019. This is a little bit of an unusual situation, so let me give some quick background. State funds were appropriated in the 2017 budget, passed in the special session to sustain children's residential mental health services in anticipation of an IMD designation by CMS. Unfortunately, for the math to work for the special session agreement, 2 months for the biennium, May and June of 2019, were left unfunded in anticipation of funding these 2 remaining months in the 2018 session. Though there was bipartisan agreement to fund these 2 months in 2018, funding was vetoed as part of the final omnibus spending bill last session. Now the issue is timing. Children and youth needing this level of care, their families, counties responsible to place them for treatment, and service providers all need reassurance that the state will keep its commitment and provide the needed state funding to assure services will be delivered this spring. Passing the needed $470,000 in funding early in the session will send a signal that serving kids in need of intensive mental health treatment is a priority.
Well, thank you so much for bringing this bill forward. Do we have any testifiers?
I do not.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to testify on House File 679? Okay, is there any discussion from the committee? Any questions? Chair Liebling.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Morrison, for carrying this important bill. I just wanted to give just a bit more context to members about what this is. So the IMD that, we use so many acronyms around here, the IMD that Representative Morrison mentioned. So what happened is under federal law, there's a rule that says that if you have more than 16 beds in a mental health facility, that it's designated an institute for mental disease, which is something that we are not supposed to have anymore. So in other words, the federal government does not share in the funding of that when you have a facility that is larger than the rules. So that's what this is about. The federal government had finally disallowed funding for some of these residential treatment centers that are for children with very, very high mental health needs. And they're all around the state. I forget how many of them there are, but the bottom line is that the state has to fund them without federal participation. So that's what we're talking about here. The 2 months of funding that Representative Morrison was discussing are left for just this biennium. And then we're going to as well have to consider what we're going to do going forward, because this is something that's falling only in the state budget. So I just wanted to give that little bit of context, Madam Chair, because this is the policy committee. And so there is a policy issue here, even though the bill doesn't necessarily say so. That's really about that IMD issue and the fact that these children, we have to make sure they get the care they need, and we're going to have to do something going forward. So that's
Thank you, Chair Liebling, for that explanation of the policy in this bill. This really, really is an important issue. Thank you so much. Is there any further discussion? Being no further discussion, Representative Morrison renews her motion that House File 679 be recommended for re-referral to the Committee on Ways and Means. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion prevails. House File 679 is recommended for re-referral to the Committee on Ways and Means.
Thank you,
Thank
Madam
you so much, Representative Morrison. Okay. All right, so we have our next bill up. Representative Cantrell with House Files 12. I just would like to maybe do a little information about how we're going to run this portion in this committee. So before we begin the next bill, I want to lay out that this hearing, as you can see, there's much interest in this issue. We have several folks who wants to testify on this bill. And so we're going to have Representative Cantrell make some opening remarks and quickly explain what the bill does. We're then going to take the remainder of our normal committee time until 4:15 today and divide that time into 2 even blocks of time for testimonies. The first block of time would be for people to speak in support of the bill, and the second block of time is for people wishing to express concerns or opposition to the bill. We will work through the list of scheduled testifiers on the agenda first, and then, if there is any time remaining for each block, we will welcome additional testimony from the audience. We will recess for members to attend caucus at 4:15, then reconvene in this room later this evening for the committee for further discussion on the bill. For those testifying today, I ask that you keep your remarks concise so that we can have as many people as possible testify on both sides of this bill. And so, with that, the chair moves that House File 12 be recommended for re-referral to the Committee of Commerce, on Commerce. We have the bill before the committee. Welcome, Representative Cantrell. Please present your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, today I present to the committee House File 12, a bill to protect children, vulnerable adults, and all patients in Minnesota from fraudulent ex-gay therapy, also known as conversion therapy. Although I am using the word therapy in reference to the medically unsound practices and techniques that this bill will ban, there is nothing therapeutic about conversion therapy. And my testifiers will explain to you why that is. Conversion therapy, for the purposes of this bill, is defined as techniques administered by a mental health professional or mental health practitioner to an individual with the ultimate goal of changing an individual's sexual orientation or gender identity. This bill does not define conversion therapy as a therapy or a therapeutic interaction in which an individual seeks to understand, explore, gain a better comprehension of what their gender identity and sexuality is. So I just want to say that kind of right off the bat. Our testifiers will go into detail about the medically discredited techniques employed by practitioners of conversion therapy and why conversion therapy is not only an unfounded, unscientific practice, but a severely damaging one as well. In advance of their testimony, I want to thank all of our testifiers, but I especially want to thank Roger, Junior, and Will, all of whom are survivors of conversion therapy, for the strength and courage to share your experiences with all of us today. Because of your bravery, we will be taking the next step in protecting future generations of patients in Minnesota from having to experience the truly horrific treatment you endured and the lifelong harm that that treatment has caused yourselves and countless others. And with that, Madam Chair, I will turn it over to my first testifier, Ms. McBride.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McBride. Can you please reintroduce yourself, identify yourself and who you represent, and begin with your testimony, please?
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Emma McBride. I work in policy and legislative affairs at Outfront Minnesota, which is the largest and leading LGBTQ organization in the state. We're here today because of conversion therapy survivors who have come forward to share their stories. Survivors like Garrett Conley.
Mrs. McBride, could you pull the microphone closer to you?
Is that good?
Better, thank you.
Great. We're here today because of conversion therapy survivors who have come forward to share their stories. Survivors like Garrett Conley, author of Boy Erased, whose harrowing story of surviving conversion therapy sparked national attention. And survivors like the ones who will share their story today, Will, Roger, and Junior. These have been some of the hardest stories that we have ever had to hear, and some of the greatest resilience that we've ever seen. Outfront Minnesota's mission is to create a state where lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people are free to be who they are, love who they love, and live in a state without fear of violence, discrimination, or harassment. We work towards this mission every single day. We answer hundreds of calls on our crisis hotline every year, train thousands of teachers and administrators across the state, and organize people to show up for pro-LGBTQ candidates and policies. Because of the hard work of our members, Minnesota is one of the nation's leaders on LGBTQ equity. But when our state still allows discredited, fraudulent therapy that harms our community, we know that we still have a really long way to go. Conversion therapy includes a range of dangerous and discredited practices aimed at changing a person's sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. These harmful practices are based on the false claim that being LGBTQ is a mental illness. Every single major medical association and doctors you'll hear from today have denounced these practices, and the UN has likened this to torture. So, Madam Chair and members of the committee, we ask you to join us in our mission to ensure LGBTQ people can thrive in our state and are free from harm, especially from those that we seek care from. And we invite you to join us and make sure that no child goes to sleep at night thinking that they inherently are wrong and they need to change in order to be loved and accepted. Today, the committee will hear from many of our coalition members, doctors, mental health practitioners, faith leaders, and survivors themselves. This is reflective of the broad and hardworking coalition that we have built with people from all walks of life who recognize that LGBTQ people are born perfect and need no cure. This coalition grows every day. Just in the last 24 hours, our coalition sent over 10,000 emails to the committee members before us today, asking them to support the Mental Health Protections Act, in addition to the 500+ Valentines that will be delivered. The message is loud and clear. Conversion therapy has no place in Minnesota. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ms. McBride, for your testimony. So what we're going to do from here, we have about 45 minutes for each side to have testimonies. We have my committee administrator here, Mr. McCall, who will keep time and we will provide updates on how much time is remaining for each side, just to make sure everyone get an opportunity to speak. For the members, I would like for you maybe to hold your questions until after the testimonies on each side, just to ensure that since we have lots of folks here who I'm sure wants to have their voices heard, that we can allow that to happen. All right?
Madam Chair.
Yeah, and we will go through questions once we reconvene.
Madam Chair, can I just
Yes.
ask really quickly, could there be some concession made if a testifier is not able to come back this evening?
Well, yes, that's the hope, that we get through all the testifiers.
I know, but for questioning, if a testifier is not, I mean, if they can indicate if they can be here, then that would be helpful. But if the testifiers can't be here tonight, then there's not much to discuss.
Absolutely, I agree. And if someone has traveled from a distance and that can be a reason why they cannot, we will also want to honor that too. Yep, thank you. So thank you, Ms. McBride.
Thank you.
I'm going to call the next testifier, Will Bergstrom, Samson Bergstrom. And also Roger Sanchez. Can you come down, please, too? Ms. McBride, can we get Will Bergstrom to replace your seat.
Yes,
Yes.
I'm going to stay up here with him as a support, if that is okay
A
with the
support.
committee.
Okay, all right. Please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you're with, and we're ready to hear your testimony.
Thank you. My name is Will Sampson Bernstrom. I use he, him pronouns. I am an elder at Apple Valley Community of Christ in Apple Valley, and I am a survivor of conversion therapy. From 2006 to 2010, I participated in a variety of types of conversion therapy. Some sessions occurred in church offices. Some were in licensed mental health facilities. My parents would be present for some sessions. During those times, we would search for an unresolved trauma from my past that might explain my illness. And when my parents weren't there, the conversation would turn to them. What had they done to cause so much anger and resentment that I would believe the lie that I was gay? When I was asked to leave or kicked out of my private Christian school following my public outing in 2009, I offered to return to conversion therapy, I think as repentance. But for the next, every Thursday for over a year, I would go back to Panama City, Florida, to visit with a licensed therapist who at times would perform a practice called theophostic or transformative prayer ministry, which I liken to hypnosis. We'd pray for God to bring up these lies from my past. And almost like with your DVR remote, we deleted those memories. And I can't explain what that looks like or feels like. But I know that to this day, there are spots in my brain that when I try to remember my life, my family, I see the bright light that was supposed to represent the love of Christ. My family and I are much, much better today. My dad married my husband and I at our church. My mom made phone calls during the Vote No campaign a few years ago. And I live a life with a lot of joy in it. But that doesn't take away from the years of development that I was told I was a threat and dangerous to other people, and that I lived a sin that I had the power to change. And it wasn't true. My parents and I were lied to, and fraud was committed against my family, and it's happening today in Minnesota. And I thank you all for hearing my story and the other stories that you're going to hear. Just please protect us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Really appreciate it. Roger? And Junior Avalos? Okay, please introduce yourself for the record and proceed.
Excuse me. My name is Jose. First name Jose Roger Sanchez, but I go by Roger Sanchez. I work as an educator here in Minnesota, in White Bear Lake, and I grew up in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I grew up thinking that being gay was wrong, and I was told that directly and indirectly throughout my childhood. There came a time when I came forward about being gay. At the time, I called it same-sex attraction. My father told me that it was wrong and that it needed to be changed. My bishop at the time recommended conversion therapy. I did not know any better. I did not know where to turn, but to the people that had raised me and to my church leaders, and so I consented. I told someone before, like a lamb to the slaughter, I went forth with conversion therapy. What happened during those years, it was a rewire. They were trying to rewire me to why I was the way I was and to why I was gay, and they validated that it was wrong. They what I thought to be someone who was licensed and a professional and that knew what they were talking about. They validated that being gay was wrong, and I bought into it, and I thought there was something wrong with me, and for many years after, it tormented me to the point of contemplating suicide, to the point of wanting to change my life, and I would drink just to try to forget it because nobody wanted me, and I felt that I was alone and that I needed to change. And it took one person to help me realize that there was nothing wrong with me, and I, for so many years, also believed that God didn't love me and that God had abandoned me because I prayed and I tried to change and I tried to do everything they would tell me so I can change, and it wasn't working. So I felt that I was a defect. But I came to realize that God's not going to judge me for who I love. He's going to judge me for the content of my heart and who I am, and that he created me perfectly, and he makes no mistake. So I'm here today to say that conversion therapy is wrong, and that I want to make sure that people do not go through the same thing. I was robbed of a childhood. I was robbed of my early 20s to not be able to love who I love, and I still struggle with to this day. There's so many things I still struggle with, and I work through it. And I've gone to people who practice real therapy to help me realize that I am perfect and that I can get through this. So I ask you to help young people and who are being preyed upon. Their parents are being preyed upon by the pseudoscience that they can change when they cannot. Thank you for hearing me today.
And thank you for your testimony. Thank you. Junior? And Dr. Alder-Holden? Please introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Hi, my name is Junior Avalos, legally Ernest. I work for Outfront, and I'm an organizer for them, but I'm here as a survivor of conversion therapy. From the age of 10 to 15, I went through spiritual guidance. From a young age, I knew that the love that I presented was different, and I was told it was wrong. And I was pressured into thinking that, one, I was a monster, that as a 10-year-old, I was perverted, I was disgusting, and as a little 10-year-old, I hated myself. And as I continued to go through this spiritual guidance, I couldn't change the feelings that I had. And at 13, I officially bursted out saying I'm gay. And I hid in secret for 2 years until a family member found out that I was gay. And it led to a physical altercation. Cops were called. And when the cop asked for my statement, I told him what happened. And he said, there's camps that can fix you. I'm originally from Houston, Texas. And I was going through so much at that time that I just wanted to be loved by the people that I thought that I loved. I just wanted to be normal. I wanted to live a happy life. I was sick and tired of the abuse, harassment that I was going through. And so at 16, I looked up, I Googled, and I was like, how to be straight. And a camp popped up. It was in Texas. And so I applied to get into it, and I went to this camp. I took a bus all by myself from Houston to Austin, got picked up at the bus station by some random people that I was communicating with to attend this camp. And when it first arrived, it's like any summer camp, I thought. It had a nice cabins by a lake in the forest. But the experiences that I had there were horrendous. It was a mix of religious leaders and supposedly ex-gays and people that were saying that they could fix me and that they could cure me of whatever disease I had. When I got there, they tried to lower our guards by using language that would make us feel safe, that we were being welcomed, that we were in some sort of brotherhood here on the same journey. And they used language like this to at some point attack us and make us feel worse than how we arrived. Examples of that would be that they thought they can condition us, and as Roger mentioned, rewire how our minds work. They try to use repetition by throwing slurs at us, and another example is that they would make us practice mannerisms that were masculine, and if we had a limp wrist, if our voices went up too high, we risked the possibility of being physically assaulted. And to follow that, a lot of the hypocrisy that was here, a lot of these ex-gay people were also coming into our cabins at night and sexually assaulting us. So I came out feeling worse. I came out still with the same feelings. I came out feeling like I wasn't going to change. I came out with suicidal thoughts. I came out with anxiety. I came out with so many disturbed feelings. I was thinking of how I could make it easy to kill myself, how to be able to also do it without hurting my family and stuff like that. And that experience alone was from people that had no medical background, had no license to practice any sort of therapy. They beat us up like dogs, thinking they could change us. They treated me and beat me up like a dog instead of a human being. As a 16-year-old, I was treated like a dog. And it's not fair that a kid has to go through that. It's not fair, but following the camp, I had also planned to attend a dance intensive in Philadelphia. And by some miracle, I ended up in the heart of Gayborhood in Philadelphia, and right during their Pride. And I got to see that people that were like me, queer, trans, lesbian, gay people, could live happy lives, that they could smile, and that they could be out and proud and just not have to face any sort of, not any hate. I was lied that at some point I died of AIDS. I was told that, I was never going to live a happy life, that I was going to live a promiscuous life, and that I was just going to never find a true love, and that I couldn't get what my heterosexual counterparts got, or that I couldn't be like my straight friends, that I was still perverted. But I saw that I could be happy, so I still had 2 years of high school, and I wanted to leave. I wanted to be in a place where I could live myself authentically. I applied to 23 colleges across the country, and I ended up here in Minnesota because I decided to attend a small Lutheran college where I was welcomed and I could be who I was. I got to amend my relationship with my faith because of the people here at this college. And I got to, during the summers that I would be here in Minneapolis doing internships, I got to continue to see that I could be happy being a person of faith, being queer, being able to live an authentic life, because I would attend University Baptist Church by the U of M and see that I could live happily. I found my community here. I saw that Minnesota could be such a big trailblazer for LGBTQ issues, and yet we still have this issue where there's multiple professional clinics across the state, and even here in the Twin Cities, where they offer stuff like this, and it's not fair that kids, 12-year-olds, young people, and even adults have to face through this. We say that words can have such an impact, and these words can literally lead us to kill ourselves, to end our lives and lose. And it's not fair that we have to continuously come up here and beg to be treated like human beings. And I thank you for hearing my story.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay. Also, Dr. Johnson, please introduce yourself and let's go with your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members. Sue Abderholden.
Let me see, I'm sorry, give me one moment. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 6 testifiers in 30 minutes. So we're going to try to stick to the concise and make sure we get everyone a chance to speak. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I'm Sue Abderholden, Executive Director of NAMI Minnesota, and just want to note I'm not a doctor. I have my master's, but not a doctorate. And I'm here representing NAMI Minnesota and the entire Mental Health Legislative Network, which is a coalition of over 40 mental health-related organizations. And I'm here to express our support for banning what is called reparative or conversion therapy. Every single major mental health organization, the psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, counselors, support a ban on the use of conversion therapy. Even the Federal Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration issued a report against the use of conversion therapy. The reason for the opposition to conversion therapy is easy. Therapy is used to treat the symptoms of mental illnesses, such as bipolar disorder or schizophrenia. Being lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or queer is not considered a mental illness, so there is no illness to treat. The idea that same-sex attraction and orientation among some adolescents is in any way abnormal or mentally unhealthy has no support among any mainstream health and mental health professional organization. The use of these so-called therapies, particularly on youth, to change, when mentioned to change, not explore, but to change their sexual orientation can cause serious potential harm to young people and is viewed by mental health professionals to be dangerous. Lack of support for youth or rejecting who they are has a negative impact on their mental health, including leading to depression, anxiety, substance use disorder, and suicide. There are no studies demonstrating the efficacy of this treatment, just their harm. So it's time to put a stop to these therapies and support the mental health of young people who are exploring, defining, and articulating their identity. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. And please, Dr. Petiso, maybe? And you can proceed. Introduce yourself for the record and proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Andy Johnson. I'm Associate Professor of Psychology at Bethel University. My doctorate is in counseling psychology from the University of Notre Dame. My APA-approved internship was at Pine Rest Christian Hospital in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I serve currently as member at large for the Society for the Psychology, Religion, and Spirituality of the American Psychological Association, and just this month accepted the nomination to run for president of that society. I'm not a stranger to the interface between religion and psychology. I'm here today to enthusiastically support the passage of the Mental Health Protections Act. This is not about religion. This is about stopping mental health malpractice. Sexual orientation change efforts, also referred to as conversion therapy or reparative therapy, are psychological interventions designed to change the sexual orientation or gender identity of LGBT persons. These therapies are ineffective and harmful. What do we mean by ineffective? Research has shown that these therapies are not successful in changing one's sexual orientation or gender identity. What do we mean by harmful? Research with adults who've gone through conversion therapies consistently shows that individuals have higher rates of depression, higher rates of suicidal ideation, higher rates of suicide attempt, and higher levels of substance abuse. Recent research on adolescents who've experienced conversion therapies show the similar pattern with depression and increased suicide risk and also lower educational attainment. The reparative therapies and conversion therapies have been disavowed by all major health and mental health organizations, including the American Medical Association, the American Psychiatric Association, the American Psychological Association, and so on. The packet we gave you has a partial listing of these. I think they left out one or two when I looked at it last night. So in summary, these positions came about because basically of two things. One is scientific evidence, and the other is the medical principle of above all or first, do no harm. Minnesota has a long, proud tradition of leadership in health and mental health care. That's something I'm very proud of in being a resident of this state. This is a wonderful opportunity to continue in that legacy by passing legislation to stop mental health malpractice, which is found not only to be ineffective, but also harmful and damaging to individuals who are in a vulnerable situation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Appreciate it. Okay, please introduce yourself, and I'm going to call down Dr. Lynch.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Marilyn Paetzo. I am a pediatric hospital physician and community pediatrician. I work at CentraCare in St. Cloud. I was educated at the University of Minnesota and the University of Iowa. I represent the broad swath of the medical community within Minnesota. I am the past president of the Minnesota chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics, and I currently serve on the Minnesota Medical Association Board of Trustees. I am pleased today to offer support of the medical community in Minnesota to House File 12, the bill that we are talking about today. As you have already heard, a long list of the nation's preeminent medical organizations that represent physicians and mental health practitioners recognize the potential dangers of conversion therapy. This list includes others that have already been mentioned, but also the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Medical Association, the American College of Physicians, the American Psychiatric Association, to mention just a few. These organizations have recognized that homosexuality and gender-diverse identities are not pathological disease states, but rather variations of normal human sexuality. LGBTQ people are our neighbors, our friends, our colleagues, our family members. Conversion therapy, as already explained, presumes that something central to a person's identity is wrong or abnormal. There's no scientific evidence to support a need for conversion therapy. The concept of conversion therapy lacks scientific credibility and clinical usefulness. Research paints a clear picture of its potential harm to adolescents and young adults. It can lead to poor self-esteem, self-harm, guilt, anxiety, depression, and suicide, all the while being an ineffective therapy. I personally have cared for young people in the hospital with serious mental health issues related to their struggles with gender identity, compounded by family confusion, family lack of support, isolation and bullying at school, and social stigma. Conversion therapy compounds these problems that these young people already deal with. When adolescents question their sexual identity, it is entirely appropriate for them and their parents and guardians to seek counseling and assistance from mental health professionals. Studies have demonstrated that gay and lesbian adolescents have higher rates than their heterosexual peers of mental health concerns, including depression and suicide. Positive interventions can lead to resiliency and success in reaching stable, productive adult life. However, conversion therapy is not the answer. It is coercive, dangerous, and ineffective. So on behalf of the state's physician community, I urge your support of this important legislation. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I would be happy to take questions later.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, Doctor, I'm going to also, in the meantime, call down Pastor Comstock. And after that would be Reverend Davis.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Patty Lynch. I am not a doctor. I am trained as a clinical social worker. I have a master's in social work. I have been licensed as a clinical social worker for more than 25 years, and I currently have a private practice in Rochester, Minnesota. I am testifying today in support of the Health Care Protection Act. It will ensure that LGBTQ individuals receive care that is affirming, culturally competent, and ethical. The bill will eliminate the practice of conversion therapy in Minnesota. This bill should be passed because the practice is harmful. My professional organization, the National Association of Social Workers, condemns the use of so-called reparative therapy by any agency that identifies as providing social work services. The NASW stance is against treatments designed to change sexual orientation or gender identity and against referring clients to practitioners that provide such treatment. At present, about 1/2 of the clients I see identify as LGBTQ. Many of them are referred to me from the Mayo Clinic Transgender and Intersex Specialty Care Clinic and from other therapists who want their clients to receive specialized affirmative care, which is the standard. Affirmative care encourages resilience and promotes self-compassion. In contrast, the focus of conversion therapy is to treat LGBTQ individuals with criticism and shame. Conversion or reparative therapy has been discredited or criticized by all major medical and mental health organizations. The letter submitted to this committee by Jane Wheeler, JD, opposing this bill presents erroneous information to support her opinion. For example, citing a small observational study, she states that over 80% of prepubescent children with gender dysphoria or gender variant expression who are not socially transitioned resolve their dysphoria and do not go on to medically transition. This research is based upon a selected non-randomized group of 25 male adolescents. Citing a statistic of 80% is meaningless outside of that small group. The writer ignores the growing body of evidence that young children thrive when given permission to live in the gender that is most authentic and are at risk for symptomatic behaviors if prevented from doing so. The people I treat often have emotional pain caused by a conflict between a desire to be who they are and external pressure to be someone other than who they are. They need to be accepted, cherished, loved, and validated, not shamed. Please pass the Health Care Protection Act to ensure that LGBTQ people receive the best mental health care we have to offer. Thank you very much.
And thank you so much. Okay, please introduce yourself and Reverend Davis. Yes, okay.
Madam Chair and honored members of the committee, I am Reverend David Comstock and have been an ordained Presbyterian minister for 35 years. I'm a member of the Presbytery of the Twin Cities area, and I am the transitional lead pastor of the Minnetonka United Methodist Church, a 500-member church in the western suburbs. I come before you on behalf of my Methodist congregation, the Presbytery of the Twin Cities area, and scores of Protestant clergy and congregations around the state of Minnesota to encourage you to support and enact HF 12. You have in your packet an official resolution passed overwhelmingly by my presbytery and by over 12 other congregations. Other congregations are still in the process of deliberating about that resolution. As Christians, we believe that we are called by both the Hebrew and the Christian scriptures and by the example of Jesus to stand with outsiders, the aliens, the outcasts, and the vulnerable. We believe that this legislation is an important tool by which vulnerable LGBTQ youth and the adults who love them can be protected from a dangerous and ineffective practice. The fact that this practice is primarily promoted by persons and institutions bearing the name of Christ makes it all the more imperative that we speak up clearly against this misguided practice and for the legislation that is now before you. The obvious group of vulnerable persons, of course, are LGBTQ youth who, not wishing to lose the love and shelter of their families, feel that they cannot refuse it. However, the parents of those youth who fear for the future happiness of their children and feel helpless to save them are also vulnerable to the false claims of a cure for something that is not, in fact, either an illness nor a defect. We believe that it is the proper role of the state to stand between the vulnerable and those who offer options that are both false and harmful. Opponents of this legislation will certainly claim that this legislation somehow restricts the freedom of religious expression. The people of faith that I represent believe that this is a specious argument. While all of our constitutional freedoms are sacred, none of them is absolute. My freedom of speech is limited by statutes concerning speech that endangers others, speech that is libelous or slanderous, or speech that is seditious. This legislation does not attempt to restrict the freedom of religious groups to teach the truth as they understand it, nor can it reasonably be expected to have that effect. It does seek to restrict a practice that has been shown to be both dangerous and ineffective, and which has been condemned by every professional medical psychological association. Madam Chair, when I was a boy, my great-uncle Eldon used to remind me that my right to ball my hand into a fist and to swing my arm ended at the end of someone else's nose. Conversion therapy is a fist that has struck over 700,000 Americans square in the face. Speaking as a Minnesota faith leader, speaking as a Christian, speaking as a father and as a grandfather, I implore you to restrain that fist and to encourage you to endorse HF 12 and to commend it for approval by the House of Representatives. Thank you for your time and your attention.
And thank you so much. Please introduce yourself.
I am Reverend Dwayne Davis, pastor of All God's Children Metropolitan Community Church. Honorable Madam Chair, honorable members of the committee, I am proud to be the pastor of All God's Children Metropolitan Community Church, which was founded in 1974 as a safe, welcoming, and affirming community of faith for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people, many of whom were kicked out of their communities of faith because of their sexuality or gender identity. They came to All God's Children, founded it, so they can come to be community, not to find a cure, for there was nothing to be cured. On behalf of the 200 members of All God's Children, I respectfully ask for your support and affirmative vote for HF 12, the Mental Health Protections Act, to protect vulnerable LGBTQ youth from dangerous, discredited, and ineffective practice, the so-called conversion therapy. For 45 years, All God's Children has been embracing, serving, and empowering LGBTQ people who want to reclaim and practice their faith fully and proudly. Every week, however, we welcome survivors of this dangerous practice who struggle to see their beauty and their worthiness because so-called therapists tore them down and stripped them of all of their dignity in an attempt to change them into something that they are not. Every month, I visit with LGBTQ people in recovery, many of whom trace their struggles with depression, substance abuse, and self-harm to the horrible experiences of so-called conversion therapy. Every few months, I receive a call or a letter from a scared teenager or young adult desperate for some sign of hope and affirmation so they can endure one more hour of dehumanizing so-called treatments to change them. And I have sat with chapters of PFLAG, parents and friends of lesbian and gays, throughout the United States, in which parents tell traumatizing stories of pastors and churches pressuring and demanding that parents push their children into horrible conversion programs or risk losing their communities of faith. At All God's Children, we affirm each individual as God's unique and gifted creation. We share the love of God with all people just as they are. And as a minister of the Christian gospel, I can testify to the beauty and transformation that faith makes possible. But as a black man, I can also tell you of the debilitating harm and trauma that religion can cause when it gets it wrong. I am the son of Pentecostal parents who lived and thrived during Jim Crow, Mississippi. And in the name of religion, they could not vote, they could not have public accommodations, and people declare that it was because of the Bible and God that it be so. So I know the dangers of a religion run amok. History and experience show that many have distorted and abused the sacred freedoms of speech and religion to hold slaves, to enforce segregation, and to exclude and demonize LGBTQ people. Do not allow people to use God or the freedoms of speech and religion to do harm to vulnerable people. Rather, I implore you, members of this committee, to listen to the survivors. Listen to Will, listen to Junior, listen to Roger, listen to the considered opinions of practitioners and mental health and medical health associations that have consistently warned us about the dangers of this practice. Please support the Mental Health Protections Act and protect vulnerable Minnesotans and their parents from abuse and deception. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. So we have about 10 minutes left for supporters of this bill. So if there's anyone in the audience who is a supporter of this bill and would like to testify, please come down. Please come. Please introduce yourself.
Chairwoman, members of the committee, my name is Johann Baumeister.
Please proceed.
My story starts much the same way as the survivors, the brave survivors behind me who shared their stories. I think my story is actually illustrative of the benefit of this bill, though. I grew up in a bubble that was filled with messages of, well, that I was broken, that people like me were condemned, that they would die of AIDS, that there was no good outcome and no positive future for them. It is only by a series of small but significant miracles that I found a mere handful of people who told me that that was a lie on my journey. Those people prepared me, gave me the strength to see what horror might await me should I come out as an underage person with few legal rights to protect myself from this therapy. Those folks told me that God doesn't make a mistake when he creates people. Those folks shared with me their concern for my safety should I come out at an age under 18. And so I took their advice and I waited. I still bear the scars of the day I came out, but those scars were not magnified by this dangerous therapy. Those scars were not magnified by the trauma that would have been inflicted upon me because the day I came out, my parents insisted that I go into reparative therapy. I was given the strength to say no. As a child, many Minnesotans don't have that ability. You have to protect them. There is no other moral course here.
Thank you so much. Introduce yourself for the record.
My turn?
Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Margaret Charmely. I'm a past president of the Minnesota Psychological Association and a former member of the American Psychological Association Council of Representatives. I'm a licensed psychologist in the state of Minnesota, and I've taught graduate level courses at universities about appropriate therapeutic interventions for working with gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and queer individuals. I'm here today on behalf of the Minnesota Psychological Association to support the passage of this bill. I want to make several points about why we are supporting this bill. First of all, conversion therapy and its correlates are based on the premise that same-sex attractions and romantic desires are signs of a mental disorder. By 1974, both the American Psychological Association and the American Psychiatric Association concluded that homosexuality is not a psychological or developmental disorder. They based their decisions on a substantial body of scientific research that refuted erroneous beliefs that it was. This then begs the question, 45 years later, about conversion therapy. If something isn't broken, why are some people trying to fix it? Number two, the American Psychological Association Task Force, charged with reviewing scientific research on efforts to change sexual orientation, found that efforts to change sexual orientation are unlikely to be successful and have been associated with harmful effects. These harmful effects include depression, distress, shame, guilt, social withdrawal, suicidality, increased substance use, high-risk sexual behaviors, increased self-hatred, and negative perceptions about same-sex attractions. I ask you, would you or any of your family members want to expose yourself to psychotherapy or therapy that leaves you feeling this way? The findings of the American Psychological Task Force on Appropriate Therapeutic Responses to Sexual Orientation prompted the APA to adopt resolutions regarding efforts to change sexual orientation. Two of these are as follows. APA encourages mental health professionals to avoid misrepresenting the efficacy of sexual orientation change efforts by promoting or promising change in sexual orientation when providing assistance to individuals distressed by their own or other sexual orientation. APA advises parents, guardians, young people, and their families to avoid sexual orientation change efforts that portray homosexuality as a mental illness or developmental disorder. Those recommendations were based on an exhaustive, systematic review of the reputable scientific literature that looked at over 83 studies that had been done on sexual orientation change efforts, and those are the conclusions that they came to. I happen to have been a member of the American Psychological Association Council of Representatives when we reviewed and adopted that task force finding. Finally, appropriate therapeutic responses to people who experience distress related to their sexual orientation recognize that this distress is not related to sexual orientation per se, but is probably due to being a member of a marginalized and stigmatized group that is forced to deal with prejudice, discrimination, and family rejection. The remedy for this distress is not to try and change sexual orientation. The remedy for this distress is to offer affirmative, multiculturally competent approaches that help people understand stress, develop positive coping skills, nurture resilience, seek social support, and get accurate information about sexual orientation and same-sex relationships.
Thank you.
These approaches have been shown to be effective, evidence-based practices that are associated with positive outcomes in therapy. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much. So this will have to be our last testifier. We have about 3 minutes left. 1 minute?
I'll keep it brief.
Okay.
Madam Chair, Committee, thank you for allowing us to be here today. My name is Ryan Wines. I'm a resident of St. Paul. While I am a gay Catholic conservative, which is a whole other topic, I hold a psychology degree from St. Thomas, but I'm not here as anyone speaking in the psychological or medical field, and I am a practicing Catholic, but I'm not here speaking as any clergy. I'm here representing the business community of the Twin Cities, specifically the LGBTQ business community, Quorum, the LGBT Chamber of Commerce, and I preside over the National Association of Gay and Lesbian Real Estate Professionals. I'm here to leverage our support as taxpayers in the state of Minnesota for Hunter's bill in hopes that, and I can't believe I'm saying this, we take what Paul Wellstone said before he left. We all do better when we all do better. I would urge you, even if you don't have a personal root or a personal connection to this legislation, to think about the impacts that it has on the greater community. That includes the business community. So thank you for your time. I told you I'd keep it short.
All right. Thank you so much for your testimony. So we have some scheduled opposition to this bill. We have about 17 testifiers. So again, you know, as you come down, try to be as concise as you can. And please remember you have others behind you who also like to speak. Renee Carson, Robert Roby. Okay.
The pages will pass.
Okay. Okay, Ms. Carson, please introduce yourself for the record, and you can begin your testimony. Please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Renee Carlson. I'm here as an attorney on behalf of the North Star Law and Policy Center. It's an alliance of attorneys across the state of Minnesota. This bill restricts various types of counseling and therapy, infringing upon the constitutionally protected rights of Minnesotans, which is why we oppose this bill. First, this bill censors constitutionally protected speech by licensed counselors, clients, and others based on content and viewpoint. It bans speech that helps a person address unwanted same-sex attractions, but specifically allows for speech that helps someone embrace such attractions. Our Supreme Court has held that the government may not legally censor speech because of the viewpoint the speech represents. Quote, government action that stifles speech on account of its message possesses the inherent risk that the government seeks not to advance a legitimate regulatory goal, but to suppress unpopular ideas or information. The Supreme Court has also informed us that professional speech is not deserving of any less protection under the U.S. Constitution, and even recently, specifically mentioned, 2 lower courts had erroneously held that counseling speech was afforded lesser constitutional protections in cases specifically involving so-called conversion therapy ban bills. Just 2 weeks ago, a magistrate judge relied on this precedent in recommending a similar law in Tampa, Florida, be enjoined because the plaintiffs established a likelihood of success on the merits based on their First Amendment speech claims. It's been stated today that there are a number of medical associations that are in favor of this bill. But there are also those here today who oppose this bill, and for various reasons. And it is not the job of a medical association or the government to take away the free speech rights of Minnesotans in this state. If enacted, House File 12 opens the door to a plethora of legal challenges. Also concerning is this bill's vague and entirely subjective language. It lacks clear guidelines about what conversations, resources, and messages are permitted under law. This leaves counselors, clients, and all others expected to comply with the prohibitions confused about what the prohibitions actually are, which is inconsistent with the First Amendment's protections against ambiguity and chilling of protected speech. These reasons alone demonstrate how the language in House File 12 impermissibly infringes upon the First Amendment rights of Minnesota, and that is a precious right that the members of this committee should vouch to protect. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, Robert Roby and Reverend Hines. Please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm a mediator, so I've been listening to all the testimony, and
Can you please repeat your name for the record?
Robert Roby, R-O-B-Y.
Thank you.
As a mediator by profession, I've been listening to the testimony, and it's been very, very informative and very helpful. I came today out of concern, and I'll make my background clear as to where I'm coming from, but over the past 36 years, I've been a youth worker, a guardian ad litem, worked with families. My primary occupation as a licensed attorney for the last 26 years. Not a doctor, but I have a Juris Doctorate. But I'm a Rule 114 qualified neutral, and I mediate about 75 to 100 cases a year involving families in conflict. My concern over this bill is its impact on the increasing number of children in Minnesota today who are end up needing therapy or some kind of mental health work to be done. The durability of relationships is at an all-time crisis level right now. Children go through so many transitions, more than ever in our history. Stability is a rare thing, and kids are being affected by this. And the mental health profession is trying to step in and help kids through these crises in their lives. I'm concerned about the amount of forethought that it appears may not have been given to this bill. Just a little more about my background. I been involved primarily in the last 8 years. Most of the mediation I do is as an evaluative neutral. So I evaluate cases. I talk to parties about what a court probably will do, what the possible outcomes would be, and try to come to some agreements. I've done probably 750 cases over the past 8 years. I also serve as a parent custody and parenting time evaluator, a parenting time expediter, and I serve as an administrative hearing officer in 3 cities in Minnesota. Member of the Bar Association. I'm on the ADR Council. I serve on the Diversity Inclusion Committee. I provided legal representation for therapists and mental health providers in the past, a number of nonprofit organizations. I'm aware of the rationale behind this bill, and I understand what it's trying to prevent. The first question that came to my mind is, why is this not being brought into the rulemaking process? The Board of Psychology has rulemaking powers. They govern what conduct, what best practices are, what mental health professionals, what their code of conduct is, how they should handle things. If this were aimed at malpractice issues, then I would think that that's where this would be brought. I also think that there would have been think twice about using a term that is loaded with political undertones. Conversion is a word that came out of religious background, religious tradition, rather than what we're talking about, I think, is coercion therapy. Okay, that overrides the person's wishes, that's not recognizing where they are now. I understand that the harm, and nobody should be subjected to the kinds of psychological harm and abuse that people have shared today. That should not happen. But this bill is aimed far broader than at those professional situations. I'm also concerned about the zone of privacy between a mental health professional and their patient, that a statute should reach in and try to dictate what they can and can't do to treat their patient. I don't think we're qualified to do that, honestly, by statute. Now, under the rulemaking of the Board of Psychology, best practices, what's effective, what really brings about healing, those things should be guiding those rules. But this is a statute that has a much broader target than the mental health profession. That concerns me. It seems that overreach is going on here, and I don't think the backlash that I'm concerned about when it overreaches its legitimate target is that the backlash could cause more pain and more lawsuits and more stress and more negative consequences to the very kids and families we're trying to protect here. This should be targeted. This should be a surgery, not a sledgehammer in a china shop. I think it's overbroad.
Okay. We have.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate it. Please introduce yourself, and can we have Carl Nelson come down, please?
Madam Chair and members of the committee, first of all, I'm unable to be here for this evening's session, so if you have questions. I want to thank you for the opportunity to share some thoughts concerning House File 12. My name is Reverend Frederick Hintz. I serve as the public policy advocate for the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod and its roughly 180,000 members across the state of Minnesota. I have come to express our strong opposition to this bill. The reasons for our opposition are many, varied, and deeply felt. I'd like to discuss just 2 of them today. First of all, we believe this bill represents a rather blatant disregard for the free speech rights, not just of professional counselors, but for all Minnesotans. By arbitrarily singling out this one topic from the many that might motivate a client to seek help from a professional counselor, and limiting the type of advice that professional counselor might offer goes far beyond the calling and the competence of government. Indeed, in so doing, the state would be violating both the right of the client to self-determination, that is, the right to set their own therapeutic goals, as well as the right of the counselor to offer his or her best, most well-considered advice, as they have a fiduciary responsibility to do. In short, when there are no third-party interests to be considered, as is the case here, it is simply inappropriate for the state to insert itself in the relationship of the counselor and client. Secondly, since matters of human sexuality are intimately connected with a person's religious beliefs, for the state to choose and to seek to enforce a correct or incorrect view of sexuality is a gross violation of the state's constitutional obligation to remain neutral in matters of religious belief. Indeed, for the state to choose an official view of what it, what it is to be a human being and how we should express our sexuality is nothing less than an effort to establish an official state church. That the state should not and may not do. Indeed, one of the most fundamental and cherished freedoms that we enjoy as Americans is the right to follow the dictates of our own conscience, the right to determine what is in our own best interest, and to seek the help of others in pursuing that best interest. In attempting to set limits on what those best interests might be and prohibiting others from helping us to pursue those interests, we have here clearly a form of coercion that the government is not warranted to engage in and should cause all of us to recoil from. Members of the committee, I urge you not to pass this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Members, do you have any questions for this testifier? Because he will not be around this afternoon, this evening. Okay. Carnelson, David Kirby. Okay, and in the meantime, Mr. Nelson, could you introduce yourself and proceed?
Yeah, good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee. My name is Carl Nelson. I am president of Transform Minnesota. Transform Minnesota is a regional network of churches, and a key part of our mission is to provide training to pastors and church leaders to equip them as they serve their congregations. As a church network, we oppose this bill because it's broadly written and it does not specifically address conversion therapy practices that have been shown to be harmful, such as those that we've heard earlier today from survivors. Serving as a network of churches and communities all across Minnesota, we're aware that Christians frequently seek spiritual help and professional counsel to address a whole range of sexual behaviors and feelings that they may be trying to align with the teachings of their faith. One of the tenets of the Christian faith is that change is possible. Some people do want to change their feelings of same-sex attraction or to identify with their biological sex. The people who make this choice because of their religious beliefs should have the right to choose the kind of counseling that they determine will best help them. But in fact, this bill actually discriminates against those who have same-sex attraction or who are experiencing a degree of gender confusion, who because of their religious beliefs want to change and seek out professional counseling to support the behavior change that they are trying to make. Certainly, we would agree that abusive or coercive and unproven counseling techniques should not be allowed. And if this bill were addressing those specific practices that have been shown to be harmful, we'd certainly support that. As a church network, we also often provide teaching conferences that pastors sometimes pay a fee to attend. And some of the conferences that offer religious teaching talk about the possibility of reorienting one's sexual desires. And the advertisement and sales clause of this bill is so broadly written that even a faith-based organization like ours would have to discontinue the religious training that we are providing to our pastors. Religious freedom is a founding principle of this nation, and the state should not intrude or prohibit a person from pursuing the kind of counseling that they believe would help them make the kind of life changes that they desire that are based upon their religious beliefs. And so I would urge the members of this committee to vote no on this bill.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Can we get the next testifier to introduce yourself and call down Nate Olo?
Yes. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. My name is Dave Kirby, and I'm a licensed doctoral level clinical psychologist in Minnesota, and I oppose House File 12. And I have 5 reasons here, quick ones. Number one, I am disappointed that the term conversion therapy is used to describe all therapy that is not gay affirming. This term reeks with highly negative connotations from its use, especially in the 1970s, to change various behaviors in clients through aversive, sometimes abusive techniques. I think at one point ice pick lobotomies were performed, shock therapy, things of that nature. So conversion therapy has a highly pejorative connotation to it. This term has no place in the current practice of responsible therapy. And so it is highly misleading when the first words of this bill link counseling people to an outdated aversive reprogramming that at best is unscientific. I agree with that. Secondly, the psychologist's role is to listen non-judgmentally and with care to clients, whether children or adults, to understand how they want to grow and then to facilitate this growth. Ironically, HF 12 insists that there's only one treatment goal for clients, thus dictating the direction of therapy and rendering unbiased objective care impossible. Restricting clients' choices also dictates to therapists that they must neglect the critical role that sexual abuse experienced as a child and other intervening social factors may play in the journey toward a healthy sexual identity. Thirdly, this bill is superfluous because every licensed mental health practitioner is already accountable to the authority of a board that demands ethical and professional treatment of the client. Fourthly, I guess a question that I will get the answer to later, is it true that if this bill does pass, is it scheduled to take effect very quickly? If this is true, apparently therapists who are currently working with clients who are personally dedicated to working through unwanted SSA would be compelled to immediately cease and desist therapy with these clients. This abrupt cessation of therapy is tantamount to abandonment of the client, something that the Minnesota Board of Psychology highly discourages in our work as a basic ethical tenet. Lastly, this bill appears driven by a desire to provide unbiased therapy to individuals in a spirit of tolerance and respect. Unfortunately, this tolerance and respect seems to apply only to specified clients and discriminates against a minority that desires to strive toward heterosexuality. The spirit of intolerance in this bill is surprising, and the dictation of client goals is a clear violation of the freedom of speech at best and a practice bordering on coercion at worst. These objectives seem more in harmony with the very conversion therapy that this bill condemns. And so my last thought is that there seem to be 2 points in this bill. One is that conversion therapy that's aversive and abusive should be banned. I don't think, from everything I've heard, that I'm opposed to that. I am opposed when any treatment that a client wishes to pursue that might support ego-dystonic homosexuality, that should not be allowed to be conducted. That is a violation of freedom of speech. Thank you very much,
Thank you, sir.
representatives.
Thank you. So please introduce yourself. I'm going to call down John Redmond.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. My name is Nathan Oilo, and I oppose this bill.
Let's remember to be concise. All right, thank you.
As an adolescent, I experienced same-sex attractions. Knowing that homosexual practice was inconsistent with my religious faith, I chose to explore my options with the help of qualified mental health professionals and pastoral caregivers. I was not forced, I was not coerced, I was not abused. In fact, I was honored and loved in that I was given the power of choice and the dignity to think for myself. In choosing to live now as a heterosexual man, I in no way feel repressed or unfulfilled sexually. In fact, just the opposite. I've been happily married for 14 years, and I'm the proud father of 3 beautiful children, none of which would have been possible if I had not had the freedom to choose my own counseling objectives. Furthermore, as a pastor, I'm now a pastor, I've worked with many young people over the past 20 years who were questioning their sexual orientation or gender identity and who were, like me, wanting to bring their sexual orientation and gender identity into agreement with their faith. These young people were given the same love, honor, and dignity afforded me in my youth, the power of choice, and the dignity to think for themselves. If a young person didn't want to meet with me, they were blessed and released. It is not the place of Minnesota legislators to hinder the Church of Minnesota from providing information and care to people who are questioning their sexual orientation and gender identity. There are many in this state who desire the input of their faith communities so to make well-informed, wise choices regarding how they navigate their same-sex attractions or gender dysphoria in a way that honors their religious faith. To take away their power of choice and their right to information is by definition abuse. I now work with people coming out of trauma and abuse, and I know how important it is to make sure the individual is in charge of his or her counseling goals. Please do not take away the yes or the no of questioning youth. If I were to write a book about my experience encouraging others to pursue a particular path like mine and wanted to sell it, under this bill, it is my understanding that I could be prosecuted for consumer fraud if it was interpreted as promoting conversion therapy. Do not hinder my freedom of speech by making it illegal to tell my story. Do not take away my place in Minnesota society by rendering my story fraudulent. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we have about 20 minutes left in this hearing. I want you to proceed. Introduce yourself and Jeremy Dahlin. You come down, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and representatives. My name is John Rettman. My story began when I was an adolescent, probably 13 or 14 years old. I realized that I was sexually attracted to men and that my life going forward would be different than most of my peers. You see, I have been a devout Christian since I was able to understand who Jesus was and what he did for me. I believe that God made me, knew my situation, and knew what was best. My Christian faith tells me that God intended for sex to be shared between a married husband and wife, and that other sexual actions are not holy. I love Jesus more than I love my own desires, so I chose to pursue a heterosexual lifestyle. A couple years passed, and I was 15. My family had undergone some difficult life events, and my parents offered me the opportunity to see a Christian psychologist here in Minnesota. My sexuality was not the reason that my parents offered, nor was it the reason I decided to see my counselor for the first time. But once he gained my trust, I told him about my attraction to men and asked him to help me live according to my Christian faith. My psychologist received this information kindly, telling me that he had worked with many other men like me and told me that there was hope and that my goals were good and attainable. He also told me that he didn't want me to obsess or worry about my attractions because having the attractions themselves was not wrong. Over the years, my experiences with this Christian therapist have been nothing short of life-saving. In high school, I experienced a major depressive episode, which I believe was triggered by my intense academic schedule. Since then, I continued to grow and learn how to cope with life's challenges, including my same-sex attraction. I am so thankful for the support I was legally able to receive from my psychologist in living out a heterosexual Christian lifestyle, despite my attraction toward men, even while I was still a minor. Everyone should have the opportunity, like I did, to set their own counseling goals. Please oppose this bill and allow other people like me to pursue the counseling that they feel is right for them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, please introduce yourself and Chris Morbitzer.
Hello, my name is Jeremy Dolan, Madam Chair, members of this committee. I also just wanted to say I will not be available for questions later. I was never in coercive therapy. Like many of the victims that you've heard of today, I'm thankful for that, and I believe that that is utterly wrong. I was confused and saddened when I heard about this bill, and here's why. Growing up, I questioned my sexuality like many do. My parents chose a counselor for me who helped me realize it was okay to talk about what was going on inside my head out loud. Later in life, I chose my own counselors. I explored my sexuality and was supported by many in my choice to pursue heterosexual-based counseling. I am now a very happy, fulfilled man, married to a beautiful woman and the father of 3 beautiful children. My extremely joyful life that I lead today literally relates to all of the things that HF12 would suppress. And in short, here's what that is. My ability to choose what I wanted with my life. No one should do that for me. It seems strange that it's 2019 and we're trying to limit the choices, the services, the mental health and counseling options for people. We live in a day of diversity and inclusion. We need to include all of the voices in our state. Inclusivity truly means making every single voice heard. We need to include all of the voices, especially the quiet or marginalized ones. This bill would have taken away my voice and my choice as a young person, ultimately taking away the life that I live today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Peggy Doherty, come down, please, and go ahead, introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Committee. My name is Chris Morbitzer. I'm a resident of St. Paul, and I oppose this bill. When I was in middle school, I also began to experience sexual attraction to the other boys. I had many questions because of that about where I belonged, about what I felt and what I believed. And like many at this age, I began to form my own identity. This included interests in music and sciences, faith in God, and a desire one day to have a wife and children. And I chose my identity, and that was more important to me than anything in its way. And so I tried with all of my own willpower to make my same-sex attractions go away. And it's not surprising to anyone in this room, it didn't work. So for many years, I couldn't stop, and they became stronger. And I began to engage in sexual behavior with some of my peers. And each time I did, I anticipated that I would feel fulfilled and connected. But instead, for me, after each occurrence, I felt emptier and farther away from the path I wanted for my own life. And I began to lose hope. And so I chose to see a licensed professional counselor. Our sessions were consistent with modern evidence-based therapy. We discussed the nature of shame and addiction, my behaviors, and my own desire to live consistently with the beliefs and choices that I had chosen for myself. My time in therapy was transformational. I found that with professional help, I could change my behaviors. Therapy reduced my shame. It reduced my fear and anxiety and my same-sex attractions. This all occurred in an atmosphere of unconditional care, gentleness, and compassion. Today, my life is radically different than it was when I was in high school. I no longer desire to have sex with other men. I'm happily married to my incredibly beautiful wife. I feel more alive than I ever have before. I don't wish to change who I am in order to pursue a gay lifestyle. I found hope and happiness because I chose to change my unwanted sexual behavior and had the opportunity to find help. My life, my story is possible because I made a free choice, and my counselor had the freedom to affirm me and encourage me in my own journey. The proposed bill before us would make my story illegal. It would snuff out my story in future generations and declare in a loud voice that I and others like me are not welcome in Minnesota. It would remove the freedom of licensed therapists who are already ethically committed to a high standard of care from helping clients follow their dreams. There are young men and women today who experience same-sex attractions and want to pursue a different path than what mainstream culture declares they must follow. This would deny them the opportunity to realize a life of their own choosing. We have made lives of our choosing because we received qualified, ethical, compassionate, and evidence-based care that supported our choices. Please oppose this bill and let us know that our stories matter too in Minnesota. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Jamie Maxey, and please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. My name is Peggy Doherty, and I'm asking you today to oppose House File 12. I lived in same-sex relationships for 18 years of my life and was in therapy on and off that entire time. I struggled with depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts, which is what I took medication for. When I was looking for a therapist, and I saw many, I wanted one that would encourage me and empower me, someone that would help me to wrestle with my thoughts and my fears. I was not looking for someone to change me, but someone that would help me to know myself. Over the years, I found a lesbian therapist who changed my life. She didn't push an agenda. She didn't tell me I was a lesbian because I had same-sex attraction. Instead, she talked to me about my struggle with unwanted same-sex, and she let me talk about it freely. She allowed me to ask questions, and she helped me to dig deep into how my life experiences were affecting my thoughts and feelings. My therapist had the freedom. She had the freedom to allow me to set my own goals, and that's why I no longer identify as a lesbian today. I no longer take medication for depression or anxiety, and I live a very full, busy, and satisfying life. House File 12 would put a political agenda ahead of people like me and remove those choices for them. We live in a culture today that allows men and women to change their bodies based on the gender they identify with. Why shouldn't we be allowed to change our mind? Please vote no on this bill. Our kids deserve it. Thank you, Madam Chair and members.
And thank you so much. Can we get Luca Bopoli down? And please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman. My name is Jamie Maxey, and I oppose this bill. I am a St. Paul resident. My story kind of began at age 12 when I started to explore my sexuality. At the time, I had nobody to talk to. I spent hours on Google typing in, "How do you know if you're a lesbian?" One day, a few years later, I heard from a friend who had come out of the homosexual lifestyle. I was ready to fight her because according to Google, I was born this way. And I know that the homosexual lifestyle wasn't something that you could just up and walk out of. After hearing her story and sharing my story of coming out of sexual abuse and the fear of men and the reason why I chose to be gay, she showed me nothing but love. Just her response with all of that just left me longing for something more, something that was real. If it wasn't for that response, I would still be trapped in a whirlwind of depression, of suicidal thoughts, of just being full of hate. Now I'm glad to say that I'm out of the homosexual lifestyle and I'm walking in my freedom. I'm learning what my true identity from God really is. And although healing has been a long journey, I have such an amazing community by my side who are there to lift me up when I'm feeling down, confused, or hurt. If it wasn't for my church and for my small groups that I am a part of, I wouldn't be where I am today. When I hear the word conversion therapy, I see a phrase that has been twisted by fear. Trust me, a few years ago, I would have been in the same boat as I'm sure most people are. This is scary. What are they going to do? Are they going to shock the gay out of me? Or, yeah, if they're going to shock the gay out of me, that's terrifying. But a thing to remember is you're in the driver's seat when it comes to therapy. You have the ability to say yes or no, and and there are laws in place to protect people from unfair treatment. And for those of you who have gone through conversion therapy and who have been abused, I personally want to apologize because that's not right. It shouldn't even be called conversion therapy. It should just be called therapy. A person can openly choose whether he or she wants to. If this bill is passed, you aren't protecting people. You aren't preventing the kids from committing suicide. You're taking away a person's ability to talk to a safe person about questions they may have. I know personally, if it wasn't for meeting with my counselor weekly, I would be so full of questions and just so lost in this journey. You're trapping a kid who's in the closet, questioning whether or not they're gay, and causing them to feel alone and isolated, questioning whether or not this is the path that they should follow. You're taking away a person's freedom to choose, to get help, to seek out something else other than the lies that they're trapped in. You're cutting off a person's support who's participating in small groups, trying to make sense of this all. And simply, you're saying a person has no choice to seek help. You're taking away a person's story. You're causing fear because what happens if that person's going to share their story? Are they going to end up in jail with this bill being passed? If you approve this bill, you're giving a person who is walking out of the homosexual lifestyle, you aren't giving them any options. You're trapping them in a place where they feel alone and can't talk to anybody. And just like how it was when they were in the closet. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your testimony. We're doing pretty good here. We have a few more testifiers. A few has waived their testimony because they have submitted a written document to us. So with Luca here and Gerald Doles, please come down.
Madam Chair, members, thank you so much for allowing me to speak today. I think this is a very big matter that's going on, and it's good that we can be here together. I spent over 30 years in the gay and lesbian lifestyle. I was transsexual. My family took me to the University of Minnesota to the program of human sexuality, where I received help after I already had been sexually molested by a family member for several years, and came to the wrong conclusion that being a girl.
One second. Could you please reintroduce yourself?
I'm sorry?
I think you did. Introduce yourself again. Can you say your name, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Luca Joe Grappoli.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry about that.
Very much. So, yeah. So after spending over 30 years in the lifestyle, they took me to the program in human sexuality. I had been sexually molested as a child by a family member and his friends for several years. And it was absolutely horrific. I remember one day in particular where him and his friends were having their way with me. I was laying on the floor, and something happened to me that day. There was a break in my soul, and there was like a separation of who I was. I didn't even know how to function beyond that day. It's like I went into this photograph that was on the wall because it all became too much for me. I didn't know how to live anymore. And I recall after that day, I called and I asked my sisters, I said, "Do you see me?" I said, do you feel me? Am I really here? And I didn't know what was going on, and it was absolutely horrifying. And I remember feeling like I was trapped in this dream of not knowing who I was or where I was or how to get out, but nobody would notice that something was really wrong with me. When somebody finally did take me to the program in human sexuality and they told me that I have a gender dysphoria, and I said, "Well, what is that?" And they explained it to me, and I said, "What are my options?" And they said, "You can have sex change or you can commit suicide." That's usually what happens with people in my condition. And I thought, well, I hated myself for responding to my brothers touching me. So being a girl wasn't good for me. So the thought of being a boy was an absolute wonderful solution. So I said, let's do the sex change. And I went down that road of getting involved. I had my name changed legally, and I never went any further with the assessment. I didn't go on the hormones. I didn't go to the surgery because all the time that this was going on, all the trauma was going on, there was something in me that always said, something's not right, Luca. There's something not right. And I didn't know what that was, but I suppressed it and I didn't want to hear it. I'm like, I don't want to know that. If I'm wrong about this, what else could I be wrong about? I was horrified to even think about dealing with that little girl that was traumatized. Okay? So when I was 46 years old, I met a woman, I fell in love with her, and she told me that if I was going to live with her, that I needed to go to church. And to me, it just meant keeping the girl. I didn't care about God. I didn't really know about God. And so I went to church, and that day I went, something happened in me. And I met this God whom I didn't even care about or believe in. But when he came into my heart, there was like this, it was like my heart was the size of a pea and his love was this ocean, and it flooded every ounce of me. And there was so much love that I never had as a child growing up that all of a sudden, oh my God, what is this love? And the more he kept loving me, the more I kept opening my heart to him. I kept hearing this pastor saying that God loves me no matter what, no matter who I am. He loves me and cares about me. And I kept opening my heart to him, thinking, could this really be true? Could somebody really love me the way I've never had love before? And I thought, I got to find out. And then all of a sudden I read the scripture that said, where Jesus said, he who holds on to his life will lose it, and he who loses it for my sake will find it. And I realized that if I really was going to go anywhere in life, that I had to give myself to the Lord. And once that happened, there was a major shift in me. Something changed in my heart the more God loved me. The more he loved me, the more that everything else over there was not of importance to me anymore. I loved God. And he loved me. And in that, all of that healing, all of that self-hatred, all that self-denial, all of a sudden, it wasn't there anymore. That injured, scared, traumatized little girl, no more. I felt complete. I felt whole. And I don't have to deal with same-sex attraction anymore. I'm attracted to men. And if the Lord finds me a husband, hot diggity. Amen? My desire will be that people will still have the right to choose. It's horrible what happened to people that are in the lifestyle that they were traumatized. That shouldn't be. And I feel really sorry for the people that have been hurt, for any of us that have been hurt. But what's even sadder is that if someone chooses homosexuality, that's their choice, right? We shouldn't tell people they can't be something. If you're homosexual, then you're homosexual, okay? But if I want to go to therapy and find out, then I should be allowed that. And I did go to therapy, and I actually loved it. I stuck with it for 7 years. I liked it so much. And that was when I was still gay. So thank you so much for hearing me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your testimony, sharing your story. Gerald?
Gerard.
Gerard?
Hi, my name is Chaplain Gerard Doles.
This will be our last testimony, you guys. And after this, we're going to have to recess and come back. We have Dan Kumala, and I think Daryl Napkin. Those will be the last two. So I want you to go ahead, and I'm hoping you can come back this evening to testify. So please proceed.
Okay, and I won't be here after this. Okay, thank you.
All right.
Again, my name is Chaplain Gerard Doles. It is a privilege as a native son of Minnesota to stand before you today as a former homosexual who found an ultimate health, hope, and healing through the transformation power of faith, encouragement of faithful friends, and supportive professionals. I urge you to oppose the House File 12. This legislation will destroy the most fundamental freedom of all religion, liberty, conscience, and the rights of individuals to pursue happiness for themselves. In the 1970s, I was introduced to Harvey Milk by Don Amador at Cal University. We became good friends. Long before his life was made, iconic. He was the man that was murdered in San Francisco. He was the city commissioner of San Francisco. The mayor of San Francisco, Mayor Moscone, was killed with him the same day. Before his icon by the movie regarding his advocacy for the LGBT community, he knew a younger me. There's actually a scene in the movie that shows a phone call with a young man in Minnesota. And that call was to me. I once identified as a gay, but now I find happiness and wholeness in the Christian lifestyle. I'm particularly concerned about the language of the bill that prohibits this counseling for vulnerable adults. That is me. This bill takes away options for people like me. I and others like me have a constitutional right to choose our path, and this bill completely takes away the right. By including vulnerable adults, I was born disabled, by the way, that's my wheelchair. I do walk sometimes, but I have deformed legs. By including vulnerable adults, the true motive of this bill are revealed. It is not about protecting kids, it's about taking away options from adults to pursue the counseling that they want and need. I had the opportunity to set the counseling goals I wanted. Please keep that option open for other people like me. Closing, 40 years ago this coming March, I have given my life to the Lord. I was living in Hollywood. I was very empty. I needed someone to save my life. I was so empty and hurt. I didn't want to become straight per se, even though my desire is to know somebody that could change my life and make me a brand new person. And the day that I accepted Jesus, he made me a brand new person inside. If you knew me before I got saved, I was really evil and wicked and mean to people. But when Jesus came into my life, he changed me. And so I ask you, please vote no on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Real quick, members, do you have a question? Because this testifier would not be back this afternoon. And if not, we're going to break to the call of the chair. We're thinking that we should be back maybe around 5:30, 6 o'clock. For those of you who are in the audience, if you'd like to stay in this room until that time, you're welcome. We have the Sergeant of Arms here who's going to make sure you're in a safe space to do that. Other than that, we are adjourned we are in recess into the call of the chair. Yes.